your daily election 2023 update. This is Election Fix, powered by Newstalk ZB.
Kia ora, I'm Raylene Ramsay. This is Election Fix for Thursday, the 12th of October. Today, political editor Jason Walls tells us about Chris Hipkins' attempts to compare this campaign to 2005. And Newstalk ZB's political reporter Sophie breaks down last night's dramatic poll numbers.
Election Fix headlines.
National's leader wants more to be done around misinformation on the campaign trail. It comes after the Council of Trade Unions made false claims about what they were planning to scrap if they got into government. Chris Luxon told Kerry Woodham this morning, internationally, there's watchdogs for these kinds of situations.
Unlike other countries around the world, there's often a fact-check or media watch kind of body that actually does capture some of that, and we don't have that here in New Zealand.
Labour leader Chris Hipkins has spoken about race in a speech delivered at Ngā Whare Wātea Marae in South Auckland. He says National, ACT and New Zealand First have used race to divide the country. Hipkins says Chris Luxon, David Seymour and Winston Peters want to take Māori backwards.
There is no doubt in my mind that those three leaders and their egos and their drive to sit at the head of the cabinet table will cause them to implode if they became government.
David Seymour says he still doesn't trust Winston Peters, but he'll work with him if he has to. The ACT leader says he'll work with National and New Zealand First if they agree to reducing government spending and red tape and having a conversation about the treaty.
Government has been spending too much. Government has been putting far too much red tape and regulation. And then there's the question of how do we make sure we actually have a clear understanding of what the treaty means.
Election Fix. Everything you need to know from the campaign trail. Newstalk ZB.
Now to our reporters out and about on the campaign trail. And political editor Jason Walls joins us. Jason, Chris Hipkins was barking back to 2005 today. Why was that?
Yeah, it's been a consistent theme on the campaign trail so far of 2005, and that's for Labour for a number of reasons. The first is back in 2005, the Labour Party was behind, and then they had what has been described as a bit of a surprise victory. So Chris Hipkins is hoping to emulate that a little bit, and he's talked about that in the campaign, but also today when he was talking about race relations, and it was a main theme of his speech today, essentially harking back to the Iwi Kiwi campaign of Don Brash at the time, and he said that was an incredibly divisive period for New Zealand, and even went as far as recalling when he saw those billboards and saying how frustrated and angry that made him, and he talked about how this campaign has had shades of that so far. So that was a big theme for Hipkins today, the sort of the race relations and what he alleges that National ACT and the National and New Zealand First are dividing New Zealanders. So it looks like as we gear into the last less than 48 hours now of campaigning, this looks like the final gambit of Chris Hipkins.
So Jason, what is Chris Luxon's mood like after last night's polls?
You know, he is a little buoyant. You could forgive him for feeling a little bit dejected on the poll numbers, although it's not terribly bad for him. But essentially, you know, he's probably looking now at a very realistic fact of the situation where he has to work with Winston Peters. And today at his press conference, you know, he wasn't talking about any of that. He says we've still got a couple of days of voting and we can deal with coalition or supply and confidence deals after the election. But you can definitely tell that it's beginning to weigh on him a little bit. He's far from the days, which were actually not too far ago, when it was just ACT and the National Party in the driver's seat. And since then, Winston is quietly, it's been the opposite of quietly, crept up in the polls. So that'll be occupying his mind tonight ahead of the final leaders debate.
Many thanks, Jason.
Election Fix.
Newstalk ZB's political reporter Sophie is with us. Sophie, you've been at a union meeting today where both the Labour leader and the Greens co-leader were speaking. What did they have to say?
Kia ora, Raylene. Yes, this morning I was at a first union meeting here in Auckland where both Labour leader Chris Hipkins and Greens co-leader James Shaw were addressing the members. So First Union has about 30,000 members across New Zealand in sectors like retail, finance, transport and manufacturing, and thousands of Aucklanders are attending stop work meetings this week, and there were hundreds at this Auckland Central branch meeting today where Hipkins and Shaw have spoken. First Union The union has previously said that fair pay agreements are likely to be under threat this election, and FPAs did dominate a lot of the union discussion before we heard from the politicians, as did National's plan to eventually raise the super age to 67. The Greens' James Shaw has echoed these sentiments, warning the members a National Act government would be a danger to workers' rights. He's also, of course, talking up the benefits of the Greens' proposed wealth tax, which he says will put money back into the pockets of working people. Then we heard from Chris Hipkins, who took the stage and again warned of the dangers of a change of government, which he claims includes a suppression of growth in the minimum wage and cuts to the welfare budget. He also learnt quite heavily on Labor's record of bringing in fair pay agreements, highlighting that the only reason this didn't happen in Labor's first term was actually because of New Zealand First. So really quite a strong effort from Labor and the Greens to shore up the union's support ahead of polling day, and the message from the left parties was really clear. Workers' rights are under threat this election.
Sophie, last night's polls showed a bump for both Labor and the Greens. Did they have a spring in their step at all?
Yeah, so that's correct. Of the two polls we had out last night, the One News Varian and the News Hub Read Research, Labor was up on both, on 28% and 27.5% respectively. Still a long way off National's vote share, however. The Greens, meanwhile, are on track for their best ever election result. The polls have them at 14% and 14.9%, which would give them from 17 to 19 Green MPs, and a record number for them. Labor leader Chris Hipkins has been saying over the past few days he believes the election result will surprise people, and we understand their internal polling actually has Labor up higher than what these other polls are telling us. But with the right bloc still able to form government with New Zealand First, and Hipkins obviously having ruled out working with Winston Peters altogether, it does look unlikely that a late surge of support for the left will be enough to get them over the line.
Many thanks, Sophie Tricker.
Election Fix, powered by Newstalk ZB.
And that is Election Fix for Thursday, 12th of October. Join us again tomorrow to get the latest update on everything from the campaign trail from the Newstalk ZB newsroom. You can also head to newstalkzb.co.nz/election 2023 for all your political news and opinion. Plus, don't miss Newstalk ZB's special election night show. Heather Duplessis-Allen, Kate Hawkesby, Barry Soper and Mike Hosking will bring you all the results from 7 p.m. Saturday night. I'm Raylene Ramsay. We'll see you again tomorrow.